In this video, I want to talk about how the progressive candidates did on primary day for August 7th, 2018, looking at the states of Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington, and how specifically the Justice Democrat and Our Revolution candidates fared. Now, almost all of these races have been decided. Unfortunately, there are a couple of races that don't have all of the vote in. I'm still going to give some color on what I see happening and playing out in these particular races, but it's almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and I want to get this video out there before I go to bed. So starting off here with the most controversial one, that's going to be Kansas's 3rd Congressional District. Very close race right now. With this one, how it's been playing out, there's one county that's been having some issues with counting their votes, so that's why it's been taking so long for it to get out there. But right now, we're almost at about 60% of the vote, and it's almost about a tie here. Brent Welder is ahead, but I'm going to give my prediction on how I see this one playing out throughout the rest of the vote. And then another little tidbit of information on this race that will give it some extra color. So starting off here, I do think Sharice Davids is probably going to win this one at the end of the day, which is unfortunate for the progressive candidate in this scenario. Brent Welder, he's endorsed by the Justice Democrats and Our Revolution. The reason I see Davids closing this gap and taking the lead is the fact that the one county that is being counted right now is the county where Sharice Davids is doing much better than Brent Welder than she was able to do in the other counties in this particular district. So if things continue the way they have been with how this vote has been counted, Brent Welder was ahead by a larger percentage than he is right now at just 0.2 percentage points, but it's a positive trend for the other top vote getter here in Sharice Davids. But another important piece of information on Kansas, it's closed primary, so you have to be a registered Democrat. I feel like if independents in this particular district were able to vote, Brent Welder probably wins by maybe a 5 to 10 point margin, I would guess. But the fact that it's only registered Democrats that get to vote, that kind of tilts things a bit more so to the establishment Democratic candidates, with Brent Welder unable to get that independent vote from the types of voters that Bernie Sanders, for instance, would typically do well with. And with Bernie Sanders coming to the district and stumping for Brent Welder, I think that makes this one a lot more competitive than it might have otherwise been. But still, I would be a little bit surprised if Welder was able to hold this lead, given how the last county that's been reporting the voting has been going for Sharice Davids by about 8 or 9 percentage points or so. And one to keep your eye on, but going to be moving on. We got a lot more races to go through. That's just my 2 cents on this particular district. So moving on and covering a number of races here. The progressive candidates, they did well in some, not so well in others, and we're just going to run through all of them. So starting off here with Kansas's 4th Congressional District, James Thompson, he was expected to go on and win. He was able to do that rather comfortably here. He has a tall task in front of him in taking down the incumbent Representative Ron Estes. It's actually really interesting that he was running against a guy that has the same name as him, Representative Ron Estes, going against challenger Ron Estes. But you can see much higher turnout on the Republican side there. But again, this is a closed primary, and with a lot more registered Republicans, not a big surprise to see them have significantly more turnout in Kansas's 4th Congressional District. This is probably going to be a race within single digits. I'd probably give the lean to the Republicans, certainly. But we saw the special election race between James Thompson and Ron Estes. He was able to get it within, I think he finished losing by about 6 percentage points, which is insanely competitive, especially when you look at past results in this particular district. And I think James Thompson probably comes up short at the end of the day, but likely to be a competitive election within about single digits. Now moving on to the state of Michigan and the 1st Congressional District. Matt Morgan not showing up here on the Democrat side because there was an issue with him getting on the ballot for the primary, so he's mounting a write-in campaign. And with the data that I've seen, it does look like he got enough of the vote of a threshold to get his name on the November ballot, which is the important thing. So with Matt Morgan on the ballot, you can mark that one down. That was a Justice Democrat candidate. Also, I didn't mention James Thompson. He's also a Justice Democrat and an Our Revolution candidate. So Matt Morgan, in what's listed as a competitive district on the Cook Political Report, going to be a close race there in this 1st Congressional District. He is running against an incumbent Republican, which makes things a little bit tougher there. So moving on to the 2nd Congressional District in Michigan, we have Rob Davidson, who ran unopposed, and incumbent Bill Huizenga also running unopposed. This is the Congressional District that I currently live in and have lived in for a majority of my life. And Rob Davidson, I actually think he can get things a lot more competitive than Democrats typically do in my district. But Bill Huizenga, he has so much big money interest behind him, and in what's a very conservative district overall. There are certain areas of the district that aren't as conservative, but certainly a very safe Republican district in general, and having the incumbency advantage on top of that. I would be stunned if Bill Huizenga wasn't able to win this one and win it by double digits come November. All right, moving on here to Michigan's 6th Congressional District. A competitive race on the Democrat side, and the Justice Democrat David Benak coming up short. And Matt Longjohn, I expected him to win this one before things started. He had a lot more money behind his candidacy. In terms of the number of votes for how much money was spent, David Benak did a respectable job, but not able to come through. Matt Longjohn, he has a tough race ahead of him against Fred Upton. This, again, is listed as one of those competitive districts that is leaning over to the Republicans and incumbent Fred Upton, but I think the Democrats have a decent shot at potentially flipping this one over, even though the progressive candidate here, David Benak, wasn't able to get the job done. And moving on down to Michigan's 11th Congressional District, a competitive race between the top 4 candidates, but the Justice Democratic candidate, Fayrouz Saad, finishing in 4th place there with a little over 13,000 votes. And now the Michigan's 13th Congressional District, really impressive here from the Justice Democrats. Their candidate, Rashida Tlaib, was able to win this competitive primary here. And to be honest with you, Rashida Tlaib, a great candidate, progressive candidate. Brenda Jones doesn't have the backing of the Justice Democrats behind her, but she's basically lockstep on all the issues as the Justice Democrats. So if she was able to win, it would have been a very similar candidate. But still, at the end of the day, the Justice Democrats claiming this one with Rashida Tlaib, and they're going to be able to get this one come the general election in November, because Michigan's 13th Congressional District is very Democratic. And then, interestingly enough, so this 13th Congressional District had a special election to complete John Conyers' current seat. So that's going to go until the primary and then the next election. So that's going to be in 2018, November here coming up. But to complete his seat, Brenda Jones actually winning the, at least right now, the majority of the vote by about a little over 1 percentage point. So it's a very interesting situation where Brenda Jones is going to finish off the current seat here in this district, but then Rashida Tlaib is going to get it once we get past these 2018 midterm elections. So one of the more fascinating scenarios that you'll see in an election there. So that wraps up the congressional districts in Michigan, but also forgot to touch on, of course, the very important governor's race. I actually thought Abdul El-Sayed would be able to keep things highly competitive. I thought the Bernie Sanders endorsement was going to be a massive swing for him. Wasn't ending up being the case, however, for El-Sayed. Of course, Bernie Sanders winning the state of Michigan in shocking fashion over Hillary Clinton back in 2016, but El-Sayed not able to get that same kind of momentum behind his candidacy in comparison to Gretchen Whitmer, who went on to win this one rather convincingly, certainly by a larger percentage than I expected. I expected a very close race. I also thought that Shri Thanedar would fall off the map and finish in a distant third, and that was pretty much the case here with him getting about 17%, which isn't a great number considering the insane amount of money he pumped into this one, a self-funded campaign. But even though bad news for progressives that El-Sayed lost, good news for Democrats overall, the fact that in their primary, they got more votes than on the Republican side by about 130,000 votes right now. It's a really good sign for them going into what's likely to be a pretty competitive governor matchup there. All right, now moving on to the state of Missouri. We got 3 candidates there. I've been missing out on listing who these candidates are endorsed by, so just a quick go over those Michigan ones. David Benak was a Justice Democrat. Firouz Saad was a Justice Democrat. Rashida Tlaib was a Justice Democrat and an Our Revolution candidate. Abdul El-Sayed was a Justice Democrat and an Our Revolution candidate. Now moving on to Missouri's 1st Congressional District. And even though Cori Bush came up short in this one, it's actually pretty impressive what she was able to do considering her lack of funding and going against a very entrenched incumbent. Getting over 50,000 votes, that's a respectable situation for Cori Bush to be in. She is a Justice Democrat and an Our Revolution candidate, but still coming up short against that incumbent in what's a very safe Democratic district there in the 1st District of Missouri. All right, moving on to Missouri's 6th Congressional District, where we had an Our Revolution candidate, not a Justice Democrat. It's Winston Apple, and this was a competitive race from top to bottom. Winston Apple coming up short with just over 16,000 votes. And then now moving on to Missouri's 7th Congressional District, where the Justice Democrat, Jamie Schoolcraft, going on to win. He did a great job in his election here, getting over 40% of the vote. This is a district that I lived in for about 5 years back when I was in college and going through college. It is a very conservative district. You can see that in the voter turnout here. You have 30,000 votes on the Democrat side, over 100,000 votes on the Republican side. It's not going to be as much of a stark difference as that once we hit the general election, but the incumbent Billy Long, I'd be shocked if he wasn't able to go on and keep this seat. Schoolcraft can maybe make things a little bit more respectable than the Democrats do in general in this district, but it is a big uphill climb, and Billy Long, he has tremendous funding behind his candidacy, and like I said, he is that incumbent, so pretty much going to lock down the Republicans in this district. So we just have 3 more races going over to the state of Washington, Washington's 3rd Congressional District, and then also, I don't know if I mentioned this, Schoolcraft was a Justice Democrat, not an Our Revolution. But moving on to Washington's 3rd, you had a Justice Democrat and an Our Revolution candidate in Dorothy Gasquet. She did not do all that well, going on and finishing well back here with just 4.6% of the vote. One of the lesser performing candidates that we saw on the progressive side here on August 7th, 2018 in all of these different results. All right, so just a couple more here. Washington's 7th Congressional District, incumbent Pramila Jayapal. She's going to go ahead and win this one, certainly in a very safe district for her. And Pramila Jayapal is a Justice Democrat. And then just one more result here. That's going to be Washington's 9th Congressional District. And for whatever reason, this is another one of those districts where we're having a hard time getting to the 100%. It's been frozen at 62% for I don't know how many hours now. So it can't be called, but you have a Justice Democrat candidate in Sarah Smith, and she's just trying to beat the GOP for 2nd place because the top 2 candidates go on to the general election. Everyone knew Adam Smith, the incumbent Democrat, was going to win this primary, but the progressive challenger here, Sarah Smith, was hoping to get 2nd place and then try to beat the incumbent Democrat come the general election here. But right now she's a little bit behind the GOP candidate, still 38% of the vote to come in, so it isn't outside the realm of possibility that she could end up getting 2nd. At this point, I'd be more surprised if she was able to get into the runoff, but still a competitive result here between 2nd and 3rd place, and it's still undecided at this point, but the Justice Democrat candidate is currently losing. So that's going to wrap up all of the Justice Democrat and Our Revolution candidates that we had on the board here today for August 7th, 2018 in all of the primaries. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get the full results on all of these races, and I'm going to go back to that Kansas race. And we still see that it's at the same mark here with Brent Welder ahead by 0.2 percentage points. As soon as I get a result on this race, I'll post it down in the comment section and I'll pin it. But also you can just check this as well through Google. But at this point, still too close to call, obviously. And like I said, my prediction on this one is David's probably going to eke this one out at the end. And a lot of that is because this is a closed primary in Kansas where only registered Democrats are able to vote. I think that hurts Welder here. But still a very close result right now. So thanks, guys, for stopping on in. That's going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment on how you think things played out and your feelings on the whole situation. Subscribe for more content, and I hope to see you back here for future videos.